of Black mental health, it's kind of difficult because I don't even think we called it mental health, like in our Black community, for a long time. So when I take into what I understand about mental health, I would say when we think about Blackness, right, coming from, slavery, that's when we really start identifying as Blackness. It's been difficult. I think as a community of people, our mental health, we've had to figure out how to navigate through horrific conditions, stressors, in which you weren't given permission to even think about mental health. I would say mental health, I wasn't even thinking because the quality of our health wasn't even invited anyway. So it was almost like mental health back then was like, it's just straight survival, figuring out how do we take care of ourselves. So how do we, survive within our communities? How do we have protection? How do we have safety? And how do we do that without ever thinking really about ourselves? Because in the conditions, when you think about, slavery, Jim Crow, it's been constantly focused on like, how do we preserve the next generation of people while we also don't get permission to take care of ourselves. And over time, that's when we morph into, generational trauma, these negative beliefs about what it means to be who we are. Like I mentioned, even starting to feel like I'm not supposed to be here, I don't belong here, but I have to show up anyway. Seeing that passed down into what I even see like as ancestral resilience. And so the idea that mental health now, which is why depression don't look the same, as it does for like white people, it's like, you still get up and go to work. You don't have permission to sit down and do nothing, to cry and not do things. You gotta cook dinner, you gotta go to work, and you don't have the same privileges as others. So our mental health, when I think about that, is doing it in spite of, in the midst of not getting permission to rest the way we should, care the way we should. And every time we do that, that's a reclamation to our ancestors. Yeah, I think we have to recognize that we have power within us. I think we're talking about systemic racism, systemic, oppression in general. It is so, it swallows you. And what can happen is when we're swallowed all the time and we're breathing that in, we start to believe there's no hope. And even though they went through that, this is as good as it's gonna get. So we can't even unlock those ancestral gems that were passed down to us. But when we recognize and pause and say, okay, what's happening, one, within our body, because this doesn't live in our mind. We talk about mental health, but it lives in our body. Like we are storing the weight. That's why people feel heavy. That's why when you're anxious, your stomach hurts, you're shaky. We gotta figure out, okay, what's happening in my body? Where did those messages come from? What do I believe about myself in that moment? And then where do I wanna release that? Right? And so a lot of that time is even thinking like, okay, what have my ancestors passed down to me that I still have? Right? Whether that's I have the freedom, I have the permission to pause. I'm big on let me take care of my body because I know my ancestors never had the opportunity to. That meant life or death. In this moment, I can pause and that gives me life. And I get the chance to choose that for myself. So even slowing down within those aspects, unlocking the new messages we want to believe about ourselves, because society is going to tell us about ourselves before we even get outside the door. And they're going to tell our children about that. So thinking about is not just how do I do it as an adult, how do I make sure the generations after me that are already here can start to remove that. So from the books that they read, to the images that they see, to the way that we talk about ourselves, because sometimes, let's be real, we do say things that keep us in those messages. You're a little, do you want you to stay inside? You're getting a little dark, right? Why are you talking like that? I'm gonna name you this name so that way you don't have discrimination. And I know it's done in ways of safety, but it does take away our power and the beauty in our names and the creativity within our names and what they mean. So if we stop assimilating into what society says will make us acceptable, we're gonna be able to unlock that power. And that doesn't start by just doing this extravagant, going to therapy. That starts in the house, and that starts within our bodies.
There is so much that goes with our culture. Now, if we go the historical trauma route, right? The idea of stopping was punitive. The idea of stopping was death. And so when we think about the historical ramifications of that, slavery did a number on our culture. And so now that we're getting into this permissive culture where you can be who you want, say what you want, take care of yourself the way that you want. A lot of us, depending on the generation in which you're in, it sounds foreign and it sounds unhealthy because how in the world are you going to stop? You need to keep going because for years we've been known as being lazy and unproductive and uneducated and illiterate. And so the idea now of like, well, why don't you take care of yourself and find out who you are for real outside of the stereotype threats that have been placed upon you? Absolutely. Now, I want to give social media its props. I go to social media every day for something. Define this. Is there an intervention for that? Tell me more about this therapy intervention, right? Or this therapy theoretical orientation. So I use it a lot for psychoeducation. But I think where it can get kind of shaky is that comparison trap. People believe that I could do that in 30 seconds, just like they did in 30 seconds. Or I could become that in 1 week just because I saw this clip. And it's not that easy. And so people start to get discouraged when they don't see that movement in their own lives. And so they're comparing themselves to something that they may not even been destined or purposed for. And so I would say that if we can get ourselves out of comparison trap and learn how to celebrate people on social media, I think that we could do some better managing and balancing of that. Yeah, so you are sitting in the place where it happens, right? So we'll talk about unhealthy family dynamics. We'll talk about family disruption. Now, I'm saying the terminology, but I'm listening to narratives where, well, my parent died, or he wasn't there, or I've been doing this by myself. And so then you get to add the actual component onto it, and they're like, that's what that was. So you get a lot of confirmation when you start to give that knowledge and that wisdom to people from a psychoeducation or a clinical point of view. And so they're just like, okay, so what do I do now? Because, we get a lot of maybe co-signing when we talk to our friends or when we go out to a party or, we're getting our hair done, getting our nails done. You get a lot of co-signage, right? But you never get the idea of, okay, so what are your options to change from this point? And so that's why I feel like this office is so important, is because I cherish people's lives in here. And I always tell clients or patients that I work with, you're the expert of your own life. I'm just sprinkling in something you didn't know. You can use it, and if you don't like it, we'll come back together and collaborate and see what else is out there. But I want you to be better when you leave this spot. And so, yeah, we've been talking about issues. It's just when they come in this building, we're giving the clinical terminology where they could be like, oh, I always thought something, but I didn't want to say nothing out loud because I thought maybe it was just me. And what I find is that though, like anxiety, depression, personality disorders, it gives a negative connotation that's there something's wrong with me, and so I have to isolate myself. And that's where Black joy gets severed. And so here is where I'm trying to get that acclimated back into one person's life so they can pass it. Because hope is contagious. It's a research study. Dr. Lopez actually did a research study on it. If I have hope and I give it to you, you're going to go out and give it to two other people, and then it just grows. So when it comes to our community, we have the wherewithal to spread joy.
Yes. And I am so proud of our committee, the work, the months. And then, we know that our people are resilient, but I don't think we understand sometimes what that can mean. And, sometimes we look at it as, being able to actively emerge from a struggle, but I don't think that we give enough credit to the work that Black people are able to accomplish, even in the midst of our own stuff. And so watching the committee wade through community violence in their communities, watching them wade through family deaths, watching them do that, family moves of loved ones that are seniors. All of that was going on with the committee members who were still doing the work. And I just had to shout that out because you don't want to overlook that part. But now on iowahealthieststate.com, there is a whole website called Back the Black. And it has, you would be surprised just how many of us don't know, number one, that Medicaid will cover going to see a therapist. We don't know that in our community. We don't. So we go, yep, that's what rich white people get to do. but I'm on Medicaid, so I don't get to do that. It's like, no, yes, you do. And then the next thing we don't know is that there are Black therapists in Iowa. First of all, COVID blew the lid off of me having to be able to get to a therapist's office. Why? Because the rest of the world then had a struggle of getting to an office to see a human face to face. So then there became the need for telehealth. So now, even if my car's broke down, even if a bus doesn't run over there, I can still see my therapist sitting in my living room. You know, we don't know that we can interview the therapist, that we can say, I want a 15-minute virtual meeting with you so I can see if I think we're going to make good partners for this healing process of mine that I get to have autonomy over. We don't know that either. So just being able to get that information out for our folks to just be able to sit in their living rooms without judgment, without anybody asking them why they're looking at it, without anybody ridiculing them for it, they can just dig into it. So there's general resources, there's resources specifically for men, specifically for women, specifically for LGBTQ, specifically for seniors, specifically for parents of youth, because, you know, I'm almost 55, and in my generation, there's a whole lot of stuff that we tend to say just because we're used to pushing through that actually makes it harder for our kids who are trying to actually confront mental health. And so teaching us how to do it better, how to do it healthier, and how to make it more approachable for our kids going through it. So all those resources are sitting right there. And I would be remiss if I didn't say this. On the website, it asks us to do a survey. As soon as you get to that website, it pops up and goes, hey, would you take this survey? I want to see us take it when we land there. It's anonymous, but what we're trying to see is the before and after, right? All 15 of us from all these different places in Iowa, we want to make sure that what you first saw when you came, what happened after, right? So there's a section for a testimonial that can also be anonymous. We want to know what you thought when you first got there, and then we want to see how it's working for you because we want to continue to improve it. And so I want to see us jump in and do those surveys and then talk about it, man. Talk about it in the testimonial, how it went for you, how it helped you, because that always helps somebody else.
If you think about any type of renaissance or any type of movement that has changed any type of sense, like American culture, it has, for one, always involved Black and brown individuals. It has always moved the needle of what music may be, or what the architecture might be visually, musically, or even in the point just what the next, the way we dress or things like that is always a component of where those things are a part of. So let me get steering off a little bit. So when it comes to arts and culture, and knowing that Black excellence, what Black excellence is like, you don't need much. You don't always have to have a PhD, especially now. And I think also with youth now, most youth, if a job, I mean, listen, I work with, we had a couple of summer, we had a good group of kids this past summer. But one thing that I have learned, if things ain't what they like, they're gonna hang it up. They're gonna try to figure out what they need to do next, and they're very stern on those things. Or if they feel like things are not being, if they're not being treated fairly in that type of work sphere at all, they're gonna speak up. But if it's not going to work in their favor, you're not willing to hear them, they're gonna move on and figure it out on their own at this point. And I think most of them, or majority of them, are recognizing at this point, like, they have the power now. They know that they have the tools to do those things. They may not know it. They may not know exactly what to do at that moment, but they're going to figure out. And then I think if they be consistent and they stay within that realm and understand that, or if they have like a mentor to go to, it's going to empower them their own, because they're already independent things. They already have the tools to do those things now. And so I think for us as an organization, we just want to make sure we pour into those things that they're able to know that they could depend on themselves and they could be able to monetize out their creativity at an early age and master that craft at an early age. So if we give a kid a video camera who is in 5th grade, and by the time they graduate from high school, they're going to be master of that craft, and that's what the goal is, right? Yeah, and one thing too, also within that point too, also like where most students or most individuals, most youth who has came through a healthy program, they always come back to the community and they pour back into that community, and so you got to keep that cycle going into the process, whether it is, but within the point, just kind of go a little bit further what you was about to ask though. Within Black-led spaces though, once again, we get nickel and dime. And we get nickel and dime from big organizations.
Ask that question.
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that question because I have a really I'd be mad at the word, the combination of the word self-care because it feels so capital. Like it feels like it's rooted in capitalism. Like if I go do something, it's supposed to help me. But I love Audre Lorde's talking about self-preservation. Of how do I preserve me? How do I not, when anytime I'm finding things to pour into me, that I'm not depleting it so much that now I'm having to find the water to pour back. And sometimes that water's diluted into something else. Sometimes it's got a little sugar and salt. It's just things that are in there. And so for me, I'm when I look at my week, I start actually canceling stuff. Because if I ain't got it, then why am I showing up for it, right? Truly, I'm not going to sit here and now bring my negative energy to you. So now I'm also thinking about how do I respect the people I'm connecting to if I don't have it. Now you're getting all this nastiness from me for no reason. Now I got to go to apologize. I think the next thing is really offering apologies, accepting accountability, and coming to a place of understanding, even if you don't agree, I think has really helped me because I think a lot of that is rooted in my anger and my grief. I feel like I defend myself all the time. Really getting to know how to be unapologetic and apologetic when needed, right? And I do all the fun things, we do, like the candles and the bath bombs and the vacations, catching flights, right? Obviously yoga, I do that as often as I can. I find I try to do everything that is rooted in my passion because then it doesn't feel like work. The way we come together, we know what a cookout means. We know what food is, we know who's supposed to make the mac and cheese, right? These things we know to do, and we know that it feels good. We know that being out and about with each other, whether small or big, that really helps us. That helps us to engage in so many different ways to help, decompress or bring joy or reminders. I think just the way we come together is beautiful. And that's why I mentioned love, because I'm I love my friends, I love my partner, right? I love my family, and everything just disappears when that happens. And I think we just need to keep doing that because we can be tired. I feel like a lot of people, specifically here, are very isolated and maybe sometimes don't even know how to come outside, but truly just being okay too with Blackness doesn't have to look one way. I'd hate that, unfortunate reality is Blackness is, the Marvin Gaye, the Frankie Beverly, that type of Blackness is what we all know, knowing about, all the TV shows and Dave Chappelle, right? We know all these things, but there's some Black people that don't. And how do we invite them into our space and welcome them, teach them, learn from them, right? I never knew about anime till I met my partner. My brother watched it, but I was Black people don't watch anime, right? But now I'm addicted. And the fact that Black people don't, and then fill in the blank, I'm no, Black people do. And I think I think disrupting that narrative can help us feel healthy and well and whole together.
First thing I think of mental health, it's to be quite honest, it's foreign language. Within the last year or two, it's become I would say probably since COVID, it's become a very buzzword. Everybody's in the house. I started probably first hearing about mental health in the terms of some of my clients would reach out to me and say, hey, what are you doing for self-care? You work a lot. My business took off like crazy after COVID, and in the photographer world, if you're servicing 10 clients a week, almost 40 clients a month, that's a lot of work because it don't stop during the photo shoot. It's, there's other processes that's involved, and such as editing, curling through the photos, etc. So I would always refer to those clients as I'm good, because in a black man's world, it's the grind. And there's so the grind is just an everyday hustle. It's kind of that old saying, you probably heard this before, be careful what you wish for. And most black owners, at least from my experience, we want business. We want to grow our business. And, so when we ask for that and then we get it, it's one of those situations where we don't know what to do with it. And from my own experience, I experienced having clientele, a lot of it, but to the point to where it was almost hurting my business because I couldn't keep up. One of the things that is making myself available to important events. I've talked to several photographers. I'll just give you an example. One of the most recent events that we've celebrated, and it's not even being covered by, let's say Juneteenth, for an example. It's not even being covered by major news outlets. The Des Moines Register, I haven't seen no photos of Juneteenth in the Des Moines Register, recently. Now they cover it, but we got to pursue that. And I'm saying, instead of depending on corporate or main or record, as a black photographer, I feel that it's my duty to make sure that those events are covered in a way that's professional, and it's a part of our history. When I'm dead and gone, it's still going to be relevant. And, just like you, Mr. Smith, it could be, hey, this is what he looked like at this moment, day and time. This is what the setup was. This is what the location was. We have so many talented people, black people in Iowa. And I've always said, the Midwest is very underrated, but our value and work ethics, is second to none. But it gets overshadowed because of that same very reason that you just talked about. We're 7% of the population, and it's always going to be, you live in Iowa, what's in Iowa, or whatever it is. You're a photographer from Iowa. When I notice when people comment on my work, they don't realize I'm from Iowa until I tell them, and then it becomes, the conversation, like, oh, I didn't know. There's a lady that emailed me 2 days ago, and no, I want to say 3 or 4 days because I know you're gonna check me. I know you're gonna check me, but she mentioned that she asked where was I from, and she goes, I thought you were from, I want to say Minnesota somewhere. She goes, I follow your work. I love your work. She goes, man, you are really, really talented. She goes, you inspire me. And she's from another state. And so that's what gives me, I guess, motivation to continue to just push to be the best that I can be. And I'm learning that, it's important for me to help others, to network with others. I can't do all the work by myself. My style is my style. But, learning that growth is not withholding information. And I think that's kind of encompasses mental health. And somebody, now looking back, it's crazy when I used to get those texts, hey, what are you doing for you? I always see you working. I never see you taking time off for yourself. And now I'm looking back like, man, how was I even just ignoring that, and because other people can kind of see things that you can't because you're in the fight, you're in the grind.
I will say it definitely is important because we tend to not want to take care of ourselves at all, period. We're on a struggle bus already. You know, we have to bust our butts more than anybody else in this world, nationality-wise. It's a proven fact. We just have to do more. And so we lose sight of what we are actually doing for ourselves. So if you're working a job, of course you're going to work 60 hours because you got bills to pay. But we just don't put ourselves first at all. I got to a point on a personal level where I needed to show my child, I needed to show myself that I could be better than this strong person that they actually think that I am, because in most cases we're really weak. So I needed to overcome certain things in life. And when I say certain things, it's more so like your mental and your physical. You know, actually taking yourself to the doctor and not just trying to diagnose yourself. Or, you know, having conversations, going to a therapist if you don't need to actually, if you can't find anybody that you're comfortable with speaking with. Like, I wouldn't be where I am today if I did not go to therapy. So I myself had to really be real with myself. And that's where Be Your Authentic Self comes from, is really actually being truthful. I mean, we live in a world where technology is a high-end thing where you can just be this fake person or present yourself to be this person. But no, really at the end of the day, you got to be true to yourself. Remove any type of negativity that's in your life. First and foremost, if you have somebody in your life that is not supporting you, somebody who is always being a Debbie Downer, remove that from your life, because you are trying to move forward and they are going to hinder you from doing any of that. And another real huge thing is finding your faith. A lot of people may not believe in the Lord or have different nationalities, or not nationalities, but spiritual beliefs. But find out what yours is and follow that path. And of course, speaking daily affirmations for yourself. You know, put yourself in a positive mindset to where you are bringing peace to your life and you are able to live on a daily and believe that you are on this earth for a purpose and a reason and a season to do what you are supposed to be. Another big factor is that you're not the only one that's going through this process. You know, a lot of people see community leaders doing big things and, you know, they feel as if they may not have any mental health issues. Well, that's a lie. You know, we're putting a Band-Aid on it. You know, they are in there as being leaders, so they have a duty. But if you can sit down and have a conversation and be one-on-one with them, you'll find out that they go through the same thing too. So you need to know that you are not the only one that's going through this. It may be they may be going through it as well, or they may have been through it, so that they can help you. Ask for help. That's what we're here for. The community is here for you, to help you get through your issues.
So mental health, especially in the Black community, there's a lot of things that play a part in breaking down our mental. So when it comes to your physical's bad, or I'm gonna start off with your at-home situation's bad. Okay, some of us grew up with abusive parents or alcoholic or addicted parents. So you're at home and it's already it's not a healthy situation for you mentally as it is. And then you step out into the community and you're, you know, I'm saying on the far end, you're doing drugs, you're in a gang or whatever. Those particular, all that starts to compound, and then you end up in jail, you end up in prison, and it just becomes a cycle. Like, you're not really breaking away from the norm. You're doing what is familiar and what you're used to and kind of what you've been conditioned to go through, as opposed to jumping out that hot pot, if you will, and you know, playing sports, working out, when I say getting a good education, I'm not just meaning just going to school. Like, actually try getting good grades, you know, and then, you know, pursuing, you know, forward in life. And I don't want to always say, getting a good job, because for some of us, that didn't pan out, or it took a little while to even get to that point. So chasing a dream that's worthwhile for for everyone that's behind you, because there's always someone looking up to you. There's always people that you're leading that you're even unaware of that are following you. So having the right mindset, knowing how to deal with stress, not always fighting about it, not always yelling. I grew up in a home where yelling was prevalent, and it trickled down to me, and I'm still working on not being so loud, if you will, when talking to my children or other people when things aren't going the greatest and it's just not the ideal situation has happened. So redirecting, again, how one was conditioned is a big deal. And, even scientifically speaking, just on the physical fitness aspect, scientifically speaking, studies have shown that 3 times a week of strength conditioning for a minimum of 12 weeks rewires the brain's neuroplasticity. And I've seen that when it comes to different people that, even me in my past. But when you get in trouble, you have to fly straight. And as you fly straight, your dreams and aspirations come back to you. You're able to envision way further than you were sitting here worrying about all the problems that are going on. So just in the physical aspect, it really literally rewires the brain's neuroplasticity, so that way the decisions that you make are a little more clear and positive than they used to be, because it was fogged up from the alcohol or from the trauma. A lot of people go through some real trauma when they're children, and it does carry over. And I can attest to that for myself. It carries over into the adult life until you figure out the healthy way to deal with it.
Well, I'm going to highlight my culture, which is African American. And for so long, Black joy has been minimal. If you look at entertainment, Black joy, you don't really get to see it. And if you do get to see it, it's short-lived. And so one of the things I'm grateful for now in TV is that you get to see Black people smiling and being successful. And I mean, you get to see Black joy all the time. And so when I think about church and when I think about, community centers and all those things, I think we got to get back to the basics of what brings Black people joy. And it is relationship, it is food, it is storytelling. And if we can get back to that, we can have a community who will know each other just because we share joy. So that is what I think we need to get back to. And the younger culture, the Gen Xers and the Gen Zs and millennials, that we get a bad rap, that we're radical and we are independent and we don't need nobody. And all of that is true. But the idea is we had to have people who guided us to get to this place. And so I think it's our elders that have to celebrate that y'all did this for us, but also we have to be at the forefront of putting our hand back to our elders. You know what I mean? So I always think it's the baton approach. You gave it to me, but I also want to reach back and give it back to you. And I think that's what keeps the generations alive, is when we get to cycle Black joy in different generations. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I definitely think that one reason why Black joy is not upheld like it should be is because there's a fear within African American community. If you look a certain way, sound a certain way, you're supposed to be punished, or you're supposed to be an outlier or a black sheep in our community, and that is not true. And so I think if we can get to talking to beautiful people who don't look like us, smell like us, on the same side of town as us, you'll get to see that there's so much intersection within our stories, and there's so much love that we have for our community and for our culture. And so I think that we just need to have untraditional conversations. Grace. Give yourself grace. Give yourself permission to be afraid. Give yourself permission to be sad. Just permission. And then I would also say, I'm going to keep saying this, positive self-talk. Talk to yourself kindly. Other thing that you can do, exert the stress. Exercise, making sure that we are having at least 30% of our diet being green, because that is going to definitely create more space for you to think, more space for you to feel not sluggish. And then also spending time with children or around kids. They make you laugh, but they also make you think about how simple life can be. You just take all the limits off.